finishes. It was just kind of, I left it hanging. I forgot to include that the other day, but it doesn't hurt to pause a little bit and then give it a chance to have a revisit of that whole issue. So that extra one was really just taking care of what we should have covered under the authorization requirements. My extra two link here, this is really something that's going to be good that we did this now before we go on, but it's kind of optional. It's really not something essential, but it's just, I think, a nice way to improve the UI. A number of students in their work they handed in, they switched from using those silly looking little links, those words to say edit, details, delete, especially those pipe characters between them. You're gonna when you eventually get to the point later on where you're actually going through and hiding and showing links in the user interface depending on what the authorization requirements are, if they should be allowed to even try to do something. Remember, I'll emphasize again, the most important thing is always getting the proper annotations in the controller, the actual protections in place. But, it's usually a nice thing for the user experience not to tempt them to do something just to say, no, 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 you're not allowed, right? So eventually we'll get there, but please, again, don't do it right now because I need to be able to test easily when you hand in your work and make sure that if I click a link that I'm told, no, I'm not allowed to do that, right? But along with that, something that'll make our life easier at that point and for other reasons down the road, I just threw in this little bit of a UI improvement little exercise here. So we're just going to follow through and do this as well, right? Now, as I mentioned, I'm assuming here that we're using our cognizant controller, okay, for most of our uh, key entities, whether it's in our case doctors, patients, and so on, right? So what we're going to do is I'm going to arrange, we have that column. Like for example, if I bring up in the views here, I'm going to get all three and then we're going to work with eventually here. Doctor, appointment, and patient. Okay, all these index views up, right? In each and every one, we have at the top of the column where we show those normal links, the edit, details, delete links. We usually just have an empty set of table heading tags, right? Just, for the actual defining the column itself. Well, a nice approach is sometimes why not throw the create button up there, right on top of the column where all of the other edit buttons. It kind of puts all the CRUD operations in a single column, so to speak, so you can one thing easily hide and show them all together, as well as other advantages. So one of the first things we need to do is come to our partial view that we did for view headings. Because right now we were throwing in the actual create new using the friendly controller friendly name here, this link, okay? So we're going to get away from doing that. For one reason, it also makes it easier later on when we're going to decide when it should be available for given users to be able to actually click it and so on, right? So get it out of here, take it out of our view heading. We're going to deal with create links in the same way we deal with the other CRUD operation links, okay? All right, so the suggestion also was from a couple students who went ahead and did this on their own. They replaced those words, those links, with different kinds of icons. Okay. Now, and I'm not saying the way I'm going to do it right now is the only way at all, right? There's all kinds of beautiful looking little graphic images, icons, and things that you can add. For example, there's things like font awesome and so on that contain a whole bunch of them. But what I'm going to do is then I'm just going to use standard Unicode characters, right? But I'm going to make the links look like kind of a button and just use a different Unicode character for each one. So the other thing, I'm going to replace the whole TH tags here up on top of the column. Okay, it didn't want to fix for me. So I'm going to go Control KD. There we go. You've seen me do that through the menu under Edit. It's kind of a side point here, but I need to talk about it, right? That function document, Control KD. I think I mentioned before, I've always had a hard time remembering a lot of these keyboard combinations. There's just so many of them, right? But uh, I've got three grandchildren that live we built a house onto a house, so they live in the original part with some of my other family. So with all these grandkids around, Grandpa's often called upon to make craft dinner. So, I realized, hey, I can remember that. Just control craft dinner. Okay, so now I'll never forget. So that's an quick and easy way to get that reformat document shortcut remembered. Okay, so what do I have here? I'm just throwing in, by the way, this minimum width style, that just helps. It doesn't always work, but it helps most of the time preventing the different links, buttons, whatever you want to call them, from stacking up, right? Just leaves room for them to just sit side by side most of the time anyway. All right. That's one thing with web browsers, with so many different browsers that behave differently. You can never really ask anybody that does a lot of web work, you can never be 1000% confident that something's going to look right in every single browser. But anyway, that's something I can do that's pretty easy to try and get that taken care of. All right, let's talk about the link itself. So it still is a link, okay? Action is create, right? I'm just going to make it look like a button small with a little outline, okay? It goes success, just it goes blue if you hover over it, right? By the way, it's a good thing with Bootstrap. They say it's good to have, if you're going to make a link look like a button, add role equals button. I don't really see any difference when I do that, but the documentation says it's a good idea. And then I'm taking advantage of the fact that way at the bottom, right, we added this earlier on for our tooltips. Okay, that's part of how Bootstrap helps style our tooltips. So here I'm going to throw in our Bootstrap toggle for tooltip and then a title. So I can actually hover over it and it'll say create new using that controller friendly name, right? What we see in the link is I'm just using a Unicode character here. I've got in my copy paste file, I've listed a few different Unicode characters at the very bottom, different ones that, like a heavy plus sign. This one, I believe, is the writing hand. So it's a kind of picture of a little hand holding a pencil writing. So I thought that worked fairly well for create new, right? And so that's it. So I'll just put that basically at the top of the column on each of these index, right? So I'll come down to this one, right? So that table header pair, put it there. Okay, fixed it for me that time and put it here. All right. Okay. Now, same idea down where we actually have our separate edit details and delete. By the way, one of the things that's a real pain is, of course, you have these pipe characters that they put in. Later on, if you're going to do some ifs, right, or some decision structures around showing these, making them visible or not, having to jump out of the razor and then back into HTML and back into these little things just are a pain in the rear end. So I'm glad to get rid of them for that reason as well, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do then is just replace these with basically the exact same type of styling that we did for the create, right? So we have edit, details, and delete are our actions. No, of course, we're looping through each item and model, so we're always using the item ID here as the route value, showing the controller friendly name in the different tooltips that pop up, and just using appropriate little graphic images, right? You'll see them when we actually run it in a moment here. So again, I'll just do that on each of these index pages, right? Just replace these different links. So, it's always good to be consistent across your site to give the same kind of presentation of input controls and buttons and so on and so forth. So, we're following that good practice at the same time that we're doing this. Okay, we'll just run it and we'll just see the effect here. By the way, in the copy paste file, I do have some code, and I say don't do it, but we might come back and revisit later. Obviously, when you have the same code repeated, that we're now, because of our cognizant controllers we're using, we can actually pull from view data things like controller names, controller friendly names, and so on, right? It's easy to put stuff like this into partial views, and that way easily you can just, if you decide to use a different icon, for example, on a button later on, you can easily change it in one place. But don't do it right now because, as I said, as we do the work later on of actually wrapping ifs and so on around these different buttons to decide to show them, that gets much more complicated if they're all in a partial view. Okay, come down here. Oh, of course, we got to log in. I may just log in admin this time. And then now you see the effect here. So I can just hover over. So it says patient details, edit patient, okay, delete patient, create new patient, and so on. And they're all fully functional. So it's just a nice way to kind of put that together, right? Even works here for our appointments and it works for our doctors. And that minimum width style, that just helps. You'll notice that these actually do get physically smaller on the screen as we get to smaller screen sizes. Bootstrap will shrink them down, right? But with that minimum width, at least they're all pretty much staying there. I think the only one that they don't, to be honest with you, is on appointment. I've just got too many darn columns here. I think that's what's causing the problem. But we're going to be addressing that shortly, right? We're going to be coming back and reworking this whole. Remember, from when we first created it, we haven't done any work on this appointment because later on we're going to make it a master detail. So really you focus on a patient and you manage their appointment. So that's why we've kind of left this one a bit neglected, but it gets a little wonky at one point. Notice this, right? There we go, right? So yeah, despite my best efforts, okay, it's until it shrinks down a little bit more. Okay. Anyway, so that's my little extra two. I'll just kind of share that with you. And a good thing to get that in place now. And you'll notice that I just updated the live version as well of our application. If you go to that, it uses those buttons now for all of the create, edit, details, and so on and so forth. Okay, well, that's our two little extras. So we're wrapping up now step 19, and we're going to come on now to actually basic user role management.